Okay, today we're going to look at 1.2, exponents and order of operations. And I will say order of operations is one of the places most people make mistakes on this next test. It's one of the things that people found a little confusing from time to time, and I think it's due to they weren't really taught it correctly. Because we're taught to learn that that PEMDAS, or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, that says parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, subtract, which is the correct order. But where most people get mixed up is right here in step 3 and 4. So there's really only 4 steps for order of operation. The first step is to get rid of all parentheses. The second step is to get rid of all exponents. But the third step is to multiply and divide. You do this all together in one step with whatever comes first from left to right. So that's what's really important there. You don't go through and do all the multiplication and then go through and all the divide. In step 3, you look, and whichever comes first from the left is what you do first. So if division comes first, you'll do division and then multiplication. You read it from left to right. And then add and subtract is the same thing. You don't go through and do all the add and then go through and do all the subtract. You do whichever comes first from left to right. Now this that I'm showing you, this note sheet, this you can download off Blackboard. If you're face-to-face, I'll hand it to you. But this note sheet is on your Blackboard, so you can download it to have it on your desk. There's some notes for tomorrow on the other side, but we're just looking at the first part today. And then the other note from today is to remember that a double negative becomes a positive, and I'll show you in an example where that comes up. So let's look at some examples. So before we do order of operations, let's look at exponents. And the biggest mistake people make on exponents is they think 3 to the second power. They want to say 3 times 2 is 6. And that is not the correct answer. It's not 3 times 2. This 3 is your base, and this 2 is your exponent, and the exponent tells you how many times to multiply that base. So 3 squared is really 3 times 3, or 9. So you don't multiply those. You take the base and multiply it the number of times the exponent says. So 2 to the 4th, that's not 8. It's 2 times 2 times 2 times 2. And then you multiply. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 2 is 16. So that's exponents. So now let's look at order of operations. So this first example is one that if you did it where you multiplied first and divided second, you would get the wrong answer. Because we're going to follow these steps. Let me go up here at the top. Where step 1, does it have any parentheses? No. Step 2, does it have any exponents? No. Step 3, multiply and divide whichever comes first from left to right. So do you see on this one, the first thing that comes up from the left is a division problem. So we're actually going to divide first. It'd say 250 divided by 5 is 50, and then bring down the times 2. And now you can multiply to get 100. There's a problem like that on your test, and it probably is one of the most missed problems because you want to multiply first and then divide, but you've got to do the one that comes left to right. So be sure you make sure to do that on the take-home quiz and the test. This next one, there's one like this on the test too, because people get in a hurry and they go, oh, 18 minus 7 is 11, times 2 is 22, plus 6 is 28, and you just completely miss the whole problem. You have to go through the 4 steps. So step 1, does it have any parentheses? No. Step 2, does it have any exponents? No. Step 3, do any multiplication or division from left to right. So as I start from the left, here's my first multiplication problem. So my 18 comes down, my minus comes down, and then I just say 7 times 2 is 14, and my plus 6 comes down. So I did step 3, I did the multiplication. And now step 4, again, you don't want to add and then subtract. You're going to add and subtract whichever comes first from the left to the right. So which one comes first is this 18 minus 14. So we're going to subtract first also. So 18 minus 14 is 4. Bring down my plus 6, and my answer is 10. So you've got to follow the 4 steps. Okay, let's look at this next one down here. So now we're getting into parentheses. So step 1 is, does it have any parentheses? And this one does. So we're going to do what's inside that parentheses. So I'm going to say 5 minus 3 is 2. But now because this 2 outside of here is right next to the parentheses, I'm going to leave this in parentheses because that still means multiplication. So remember with multiplication, you could have 2.2, you can say 2 times 2. In algebra, they stopped doing those times because it looks like x's. But then you can also have 2 parentheses 2. So a number that sits right next to a parentheses means multiplication. So I get rid of my subtraction, bring down everything else. Now the biggest mistake people make on this one is they want to say 3 plus 2 is 5 times 2 is 10, and you just miss the whole problem because you've got to do your steps. Step 2, is there any exponents? No. Step 3, multiply and divide, whichever comes first from the left to the right. So you have to multiply first. So the 3 and the plus comes down, and then you say 2 times 2 is 4. And now, whoops, I need to move it up. Now we can add 3 plus 4 is 7. So you've got to follow the steps. Okay, let's look at this next one. The thing we always say about math is you never get to forget what you just learned. It all adds on top of each other, so it's really important not to get behind and make sure you learn all those concepts. But so now we're going to use all our rules from fractions, and we're going to use our order of operation rules. So order of operation says, are there parentheses? No. Exponents? No. So we're going to multiply and divide. So this is a multiplication problem, and this is a multiplication problem. So we got to think back, and this plus is just going to come down. And so we're going to multiply these. So we got to think back to 1.1. Remember, multiplication, think of that sign as being an X, and the X is telling us we need to cross cancel. So if you look at this one, 1 and 6, there's nothing to simplify. Anytime you have a 1 there, you don't have to worry about simplifying it because 1 is as simple as it can get. But when you look on this diagonal, you have a 4 and a 10. So you ask yourself, will 4 divide into 10 evenly? And no, it would be a decimal. But then you look for what common factor do they have? What could you reduce them by? And so we could reduce both these by 2. So whatever I divide the top by, I have to divide the other one by. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Now we multiply across the top and the bottom. So 5 times 1 is 5. 6 times 2 is 12. So we multiplied that first part. I'm going to bring down the plus. And then we're going to multiply this one. So remember, when you multiply, you're looking on the diagonals, but here 1 is as simplified as it can get. 2 won't go into 3. There's nothing to simplify on those, so you just multiply across the top and the bottom. So 1 times 2 is 2. 3 times 5 is 15. Okay, then step 4, let me pull my note sheet back in here, is to add and subtract, so we have an addition problem. The problem is we have to remember when we add fractions, we have to have a common denominator. So I need to find the common denominator of 2 and 15. So the easiest way to do that is I said 2, I meant 12. 12 and 15 is to look at my 12, and let's look at our multiples. Another 12 would make 24. Another 12 would make 36. Another 12 would make 48. And another 12 would make 60. And so that's the one that they're going to have in common, because 15 goes 15, 30, 45, 60. So 60 is our common factor. Kind of ran out of room, so I'm going to go this way. So I'm going to make both of these denominators be 60. So to get from 12 to 60, remember, if you wrote these out, you can just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have to multiply by 5, so you do the same thing to the top. 5 times 5 is 25. And then we look at 15, that's the fourth, so 2 times 4, you multiply both by 4, sorry about that. So 2 times 4 is 8. And now with the common denominator, we can just add. Remember, the denominator stays the same, and you say 25 plus 8 is 33. Now, if you left it like that on the test, you just miss a point, but this is not in simplest form. Do you see 3 would go into both of those? So remember, with all fractions, you have to reduce them to their simplest form. So if you divide them both by 3, you get 11 over 20. And that's your final answer. So that really had every single thing we learned in fractions except for division. So that's a good review there. It's probably the hardest one on this page. But okay, 2 more. So this next one, let's turn notes back up here. So this next one does have parentheses. It's actually got these parentheses and it's got these brackets. So whenever you're dealing with parentheses, if you only need one pair, they do parentheses. If you need another, they do what's called a bracket. And if you need another, they do what's called a brace. But I don't think we have any braces in this class. So mainly parentheses and brackets. But you're still going to go always to the inside first. So when we look at this problem, I'm going to go inside here to this parentheses first. Everything else I'm going to bring down. So you see I'm bringing down every single thing except for the parentheses. Now with inside the parentheses, we can go ahead and solve that. And here 2 squared, you can just think about that in your head. That's 4. So 14 minus 4 is 10. So the parentheses became a 10. We're still looking at parentheses, so the next thing we're going to do is this. It's kind of like you go inside and you work your way back out. So 10 minus 8 is 2. This is right next to that, so that means multiplication, so I'm going to leave it in parentheses. And just to save steps, because this is 4 squared, we know that's 4 times 4, or 16. I'm sorry, because next step was exponents. And then we just multiply. 16 times 2 is 32. And so there's your answer. So just with parentheses, go to the inside one and then start working your way back out. Okay, this last one, we've got a lot of parentheses. So we have a parentheses here, here, and here. And then because exponents are next, I'm going to go ahead and do this exponent also. Remember, it's 2 times 2 times 2. So we're going to bring down the 6, leave it in parentheses to mean multiplication, and say 5 plus 1 is 6. This minus comes down, the 9 comes down, we leave it in parentheses, 1 plus 1 is 2. Draw our line. Our 5 comes down, we leave it in parentheses, 8 minus 6 is 2. And then we've got our exponent here, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So we did kind of parentheses and exponents in the same step. Then we're going to go through and do all the multiplications. We're going to multiply here, whoops, wrong color, here, here, and here. So 6 times 6 is 36, 9 times 2 is 18, 5 times 2 is 10, the 8 comes down. Oops, I was off camera, I'm sorry. Then we add or subtract. 36 minus 18 is 18, 10 minus 8 is 2, and then the last thing, we reduce this fraction, and 18 divided by 2 is 9. So that's order of operations. Be sure you follow these steps if you don't want to make any mistakes. I said double negatives and positive. That's actually going to be tomorrow. We're going to do these notes down here. I folded it in the wrong place. You don't need that for today, just order of operations. So you're ready to work your practice problems for 1.2.